Hello, my name is Andrew Morgan Smith, and I wanted to do a walkthrough today of a track that I did for the Spitfire Westworld Scoring Competition. Some people had asked me to do it, curious about what I did and how I did it, so here I am. So first, let's start out by talking about why I did what I did for a second. The reason I scored what I did... The reason I did what I did is because so many people were doing a different genre. And I love the 1980s action-adventure movies. They're so much fun. They're also very challenging to do mock-ups for, so I thought I'd give it a shot. So that was why I did that. If I was also scoring the movie, I probably would have done something whenever she says, or whenever the guy with him is saying he's switching genres, I would have done more what the original show had done, which would have some style of music in the front and then switch genres to the 1980s stuff. But I wanted to make sure that anyone watching it would know immediately that mine was different. That was a big concern of mine. Like, I really wanted to try and do what the video called for, but I didn't feel like I could excuse me. I didn't feel like I could afford to have like 20 seconds of what everyone else had and then move into this other thing. So let's get into it a little bit. I used a lot of my main brass is in this, I think is, let's see, I mean, I've also hit a lot of tracks that would be, I tried to consolidate a bit because it would be a lot of stuff that's just kind of all over the place. I mean, it looks like a good portion of Cinna brass as well as Cinematic Studio brass. Those are kind of my two big libraries that I use for brass right now. And this is also like a pre-mixed template that I use whenever I'm writing in a certain style. If I'm writing in this style, a lot of times I'll use this template, and it's kind of already has all my setup going. And I think I did a template. Yeah, I did a template walkthrough that you can check out. I'll put a link to that maybe in the description or something. So yeah, let's just start out, shall we? I'll just talk about this for a second. So this is, I'm going to do my best to be concise. I'm not very good at just talking off the cuff. So, so one thing that's really great about Cinnabrass is that it has a lot of room sound, and I've also added more room sound. Like this is my reverb send. But you get the nice, like, you get a nice room tone, which I like a lot of room tone in my brass. There are some people who like them to be really upfront. I generally don't, and like it sounds more like they are in the room. And me coming to this mix position, and I think I'm just using the main mix positions. I don't think I'm using anything crazy. Is that I'm actually sitting there and like picking some kind of reference and then, plucking away and tweaking until I get it where I want it. And so one thing about making believable brass lines, and you'll see this through the whole thing, is that you have to have, like, I try not to use legatos that much. Just like a lot of these players are not going to be using legatos that all the time, except for certain lines. Even if it's just like a very light articulation, a lot of players articulate more than they play straight on legato or full on legato. So a lot of times I'm kind of favoring that instead of doing, a lot of these legato lines where it's just way too much legato. So here we go. So that rip, this could take forever. That rip is a trick that I used in another video as well. But basically it's orchestral tool runs, and underneath it, and then it goes into a Cinna strings run. So, but underneath it is also the avant-garde staccato. And you can just kind of mix to taste, right? So here's the, and I bounce it to audio so I can control the volume a little bit easier. Sometimes these runs are a little bit all over the place, but right, and then it goes right into this part, and then you add this, and really, what's so frustrating about so many run patches is they're just too clean. Like, and even staccato patches is like when you put, 30 violin players playing the same short notes, especially if they re-articulate, it's not going to sound super tight. Like that's like so frustrating. Like maybe they all sound like this whenever you hit one note, right? But as soon as you're going, it starts to machine gun, it starts to sound weird. That's really quiet too. That's better. Like it always sounds like the same bowing articulation. It's always way too clean. So a lot of my time is spent in dirtying up. Let me see if there's a better way for me to, I guess not. It's spent dirtying up the performance, so to speak. Just like it has to be kind of dirty to make it make sense, right? And I also, every time it comes out of this little rip, it's going into the Cinna strings run, and I'm also doubling that with the woodwind run. A lot of this stuff is very it almost was like a score study from Back to the Future, because I would like go look at the score, and then I would see if I was like, how can I make this work? How can I make it sound right? Can I make it sound right? So let's keep moving. This is the horn triads from Cinnabrass, as well as the solo brass, cinematic solo horn, playing like legato, or so you get kind of that full ensemble sound. Once again, here is I'm using so the orchestration is trumpets in octave and then the trombones, but sounds weird whenever it's not all in context, but like there we go. We caught the key switch. So as you can hear, it's like a fanfare played, right? Like these are separated notes, and that helps it make it feel more believable. You hear the room, you hear it. It's like it has some character to it versus just sounding like because so many legatos speak so slowly. If you make them articulate, then it sounds stronger, right? So, something that I try to obscure a lot of times is doubled up notes. So if you just hear just this, the same thing I talked about earlier, trying to get, it just doesn't sound great. Like, here's so sometimes you get a lot of nice room noise in the tremolo and the with a tremolo added. And then I added the avant-garde staccato. And so that gets you some dirt, right? Some nice sounding dirt. And then obviously you can just obscure it even more, right? So, it's very useful to have those added layers because it just kind of helps obscure the thing I don't like. The thing that I think doesn't sound great because a re-articulated string note doesn't sound like these two perfect bowed notes. It sounds a lot muddier than that. So. There's that run again. Slightly different key. Let's not do that. So now we get into these like moving chords. Another little trick that I find I do a lot is something that maybe like would be articulated as more legato. I still sometimes will make it not legato. I'll still make it very slightly. So like here is a legato patch playing it. There's a like a Albion's high strings playing it. So like, so they're longer. Right, so they're not really short, and this is like a spiccato playing it for a little more. It's like it's in it, and then together they're a little bit more. Right, and then same thing on this. So it's still articulated, but you really wouldn't be able to hear. It just, the definition just isn't there. If I was trying to do full on, really legatoed stuff, I might end up doing a legato patch with like a really fast attack, and then adding on top of that some kind of short that makes it a little bit stronger, and then so. And the way this track works is like as it kind of gets higher, it adds other elements. And so that kind of also helps obscure it. So like whenever there's not a lot of definition to lower violins, you don't really hear it with everything else going on. And then as it gets higher into definition, you're adding other elements that will kind of obscure whatever your other issue is. And then on these brass notes, let's see what I'm using for the brass. It's just the this is the Cinematic Studio brass. I struggle all the time with trumpets. Right, like I'm not a huge fan of how that sounds, but I'm using the shorts articulation and I'm having it go. I'm mod wheeling it so it changes. Right, so the last note is the longest note. Boo. Oh, I have... Ooh, boo-boo. Should be that. Well, I guess I'm disqualified now. Right, so that it's just to taste, right? And some people were wondering how I play stuff. It's like I have my pre-mixed thing where I've spent a bunch of time going back and forth and like making sure things sound a certain way. And then once I'm done with that, then I capture record. I either play something in or I copy and paste it in, and then I do my automation of CC1 and CC11. And then like if it's not right, I just redo it, or I redo it until it's right. And then if I can't get it right, I just move on. I do something different, use a different sample, use a different patch, use a different orchestration. I use something different that works. But I mean, I think this works once you're in context of the full line. Something else I'm using is a lot of times I don't worry about orchestration of high woodwinds and low woodwinds. I really like, I have the old school Albion one. I don't have the newer one. But what I really like is I don't have to place them on the stage. So I add some reverb to them, but like they're kind of already mixed back a little bit. So many mixes I feel are way too up front with their woodwinds. It almost is kind of like a Broadway feel where it's like all up in your face. You're not getting the room sound. So I just like to be able to have, like something. It already sounds like they're in the room. And I'm adding a little reverb to that, but nothing too crazy. Like I'm not, I don't have to do a bunch of processing. I don't have to do a bunch of takes. And if I'm worried about the orchestration specifically, then I'll deal with it. But, the timbre works, they work, so why mess with them? This is one of those tricks of layering. Right, this is tremolo layered with shorts. So like this is honestly mostly the Cinnabrass chords. Like I have other stuff obviously, but in brass, this is Cinnabrass chords with tuba. And it could be cleaner, but and then like in strings it's, let's see. Here's the string parts. Don't really like and then in the brass, in the woodwinds, whatever these things are called, in the woodwinds, I just like the Albion ensemble, but in the group, so I really love the runs builders from Orchestral String Runs. And the reason why I love them is you can kind of get these nice organic feeling movements that are kind of hard to get. So you get these nice movements that feel like it's very hard to mock up, and it's something you would probably write anyway, right? Like it's not like you're cheating. And the way I feel about pre-recorded stuff is like if it's something you would write, then I'm fine with it. I don't like whenever it's like a melody, or like full on like a whole phrase of chord changes or something that gets a little bit weird. But there's just stuff you can't really mock up effectively. Or it's going to take you a ton of time. So, like, if you're going to do it anyway, if you're going to write it anyway, why bother? You could just do it. Like, I say this because I used to be, like, really about it. So, and so on this, at the very end of each section, as you heard earlier, I have, like, staccato notes here. Right, so the reason why that's there is that I think it's just straight up chromatic runs. I don't remember exactly, but at the end of each phrase, right? So it has these like rips at the very end of the phrase. So, and then, and it doesn't sound the best right now, but sorry, I'm like getting winded just from talking because I'm so out of shape. Oh, good times. But then I guess it's it's harmonic. Well, I guess I put it as natural minor, but so that's doubled with woodwind runs. I think it's also doubled with xylophone, like kind of the old school. Yeah, doubled with just the top notes on xylophone. And then a nice little rip at the end for the trumpets. I think it's like the phalanx trumpets from Spitfire of just like ripping up to the top notes. So it's just a nice little, once again, like as everything gets bigger and you kind of layer more parts on top of it, if they all sound like they're in the same room, it complements them nicely. And this stuff is all this tuba stuff, and I guess this is trombones and tuba. Right, sounds nice. Sounds like it's in the room. Sounds good. The thing is, I could also even talk about the how I spotted this sequence, but let's see. I'll back up a little bit to make sure we catch the trill stuff. So, yeah, I mean, this is, I don't need to harp too much on this because it's the same tricks over and over and over again. Like, really, it's not like I'm inventing something. It's the same tricks over and over again, just how you apply them. So, like, let's see. Right, so here's the same. Oh, and I'm using two horns to make the two horns from Cinna brass to make the chord. Sorry, I'm using the floor. What am I using to make that? Oh my gosh. I'm ashamed of myself. Did I not really have that? Is it just like, did I screw up? Am I using something else? I'm sorry, my brain is so tired. I may just be losing it with the other parts, right? So, but here's the so that's Cinematic Studio Brass. And then I don't know if you heard it a little bit. So even it's so crazy, man. Like, you get a good recording of these runs, and I'm just doing this kind of off the top of my head. I'm not wasting everybody's time. So like on this little run, this is orchestral string runs, right? That sounds good. Like, it's an actual recorded run. Well, what if I want to add in low strings or low woodwinds, and I don't have the low woodwinds to add? We'll check it out. I mean, it's like the live performance hides the fact that they're playing shorts. Like, those are low shorts. And like the front end still gives you the timbre you want. And then in the mix, you won't even know that. You know what I mean? Like, you won't even hear that. So like sometimes some of the choices I'm picking are characteristics of are characteristic of like trying to get a certain sound. And I don't, like, a lot of people think about, I think, well, maybe a lot of people do, I think a lot of people think about how something sounds, and I can't quadruple the violins because then it's like 400 violins or however many violins you're talking about. But if it sounds right, I really don't care. Like, if you're getting good sound and it sounds like we're making hyper real music anyway, we're not making a concert hall piece. So if it sounds right, who cares? Who cares? Anyway. Okay, so I will say this, like, this whole sequence is my favorite part of this whole clip. Like, something that I found this style of music really brings out is Aaron Paul's like goofy facial expressions. Like, he like turns around and is just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But like there's a lot of kind of physical comedy in the way he deals with things, and I think this style really brings it out. And so what I wanted to play up is like this whole sequence of like this woman is picking him up, and she's acting very strange, and both of them are kind of like weirded out by it or getting thrown around in the car. Well, in this part, he just like it's funny. He like, the car just completely moves out of the way, like and so what I found was what I felt was very important was that I highlight each beat of this sequence where it's like he misses like ramp basically through this, and then as it kind of rips back up, like, oh, wait for it, and then so we kind of have treading water a little bit, and then we get to the top where the missile unleash itself. And I actually wanted to clear for the sound. There's a sound there. I wonder if this will play if I unmute it. So like, I specifically made sure that the sound would be clear, and whenever I did the final mix, I pumped that slightly up, not a whole lot up, so that way I almost put like reverb on it and made it insane. But you just want to have a little bit of clearance because it feels like something you need, especially since the filmmakers made the point to have this thing fly up, freeze almost, unleash its, like, not unleash itself, but undo itself and turn around. And then, by the way, this is another one of those things where it's a pre-record along with a real. So this is actually like a violin passage, but I'm just doubling it with the viola, because I'm a orchestrational heretic, I guess. And then if you add snare to it, then you're covering that up even more, and you're giving it a little more definition. Right, and that works. And And so also another thing to consider is how much sound effects really, especially in a clip like this where there is a good amount of sound effects and you have engines like revving up and you have gunshots and you have all these different sound effects, like it's very easy to overscore this. So especially in this sequence where you're having engines rev, you don't need to have an insane amount of content. You can have these little moments of respite. So I knew that I needed to clear for this explosion because, I mean, this is a huge amount of sonic real estate. Like, something to always think about when you're scoring something is how much sonic real estate the sound effects are going to take up. Like, if there's going to be a huge explosion, I mean, even how much noise this makes, like just the sheer amount of noise this explosion makes, and you're going to try to compete with that. There's like burning fires still, all this low end. Like we might as well clear, give the audience time to like reset. Because I mean, Aaron Paul's surprised. You know, like we can play up the fact that he's surprised. We could do something silly, but realistically, like there is all this real estate we have that's already being taken up by an explosion. So why not take advantage of a couple seconds of, like, how many seconds is this that I stopped? So like 249, 256. So like what math? 7 seconds, you know? Might as well give a little break so we can kind of reset. And also, like, from here on out, there's less comedic elements. So I kind of took the opportunity to, like, here's the last big, like, almost Disney level crescendo as we go through this. And then as it comes in, it hits, and then we kind of have a break, and then everything from here is a bit more serious. There's not as many funny faces from Aaron Paul. There's not as many, like, kind of funny. So there's a couple things, but not as much as it was before. And then, I mean, the runs are basically just like your run-of-the-mill runs. I'm trying to think if I did anything crazy. Oh, I used the brass phalanx to kind of do rips into... Right, so I'm using them to kind of punctuate the front end. So if I just solo just the brass that's like doing stuff. Here's like the full brass. Crazy how much better that sounds with everything. Oh, because I'm missing a part of it. So I think that makes sense. Everything else, it's just a long run. You know, it's just like a long, starts with the major string runs with a temp roll and like a whole Cinna harp glissandi into it. You know, pretty standard stuff. And I also pull back a little bit on the tempo right here. I mean, it's pretty straightforward tempo-wise, but I did pull back a little bit to get a little more punctuation. Like tiny bit. We take a little break. Oh, also, fun note, and you're never going to be able to unhear this. So when this flips over and it hits the top of the car, like bam, right here, that's like the top of the car, right? It should be super crazy metal noise, but it's tire screeches. I can't unhear it now, and it drives me crazy. Anyway, so here we go. Same tricks as earlier. Okay, I can talk about those rips. So, like, the rips are basically layers, right? So, like, one of the first is these. I'm basically just taking this is Albion 3. Let's see, it's I'm going like, oh, sorry. I don't even know what I wrote myself. So, I mean, I'm just taking this and just I know it sounds silly, but like it gets you that front end. And then I'm doing, like my main body of the notes are, this is Cinna strings, Badoo, let's see. Yeah, so like Cinna strings and you add this, and now you get kind of your low end. And then when you start adding other things in, you start adding like the low woodwinds in. And then you double with the low brass. And low brass is Cinematic Studio Brass's tuba. Questionable. But and then you get the low piano. I'm questioning why that's not the same note, but too late now. So it's all about how it sounds as the group and not how it sounds as the one part. Anyway, so it's like I like using some of these patches just to create those runs. The similar thing though. These are just like orchestrations of like an interesting chord with no vibrato on the flutes, and then I think it's celeste, harp, bowed crotales somewhere. Here they are. Vibes, just like an interesting like kind of horror texture or suspense. Return of the villain theme. That's the Cinematic Studio Brass solo horn. And like this, and all of these are just recurring. Like once you did it once, like once I do it once, it's all very similar. So like these little like rips and like here's the Trumpet Runs. I guess the only difference right now is like this also has low woodwinds and strings now instead of just being low brass. Let's see here, and has low piano on it. So it's like it's just a bigger group playing this theme because I wanted to have it. Let's see. I wanted to have, you know, like a larger. You know, like. So, also another thing that, I don't know, I may not be that popular for, is that people have said that my mock-ups sound like a bad orchestra recorded or like a mediocre orchestra recorded. And I'm okay with that. I'm kind of okay with that because once you start really perfecting everything too hard, then you lose all the character. Like part of the reason why you're recording something, if you're going to record it live, is that you're getting character, you're getting an interpretation of the music. You're not just getting this static, computerized, perfect thing. Even though like some of the players that are out there that can record are like machine-like, as in they're so good at what they do, they can interpret, they can play it perfectly, they can do all this stuff. But what I think sometimes happens is these recordings then get mixed back in with quantized, overprocessed samples in the first place, and then you get a very sampley sounding mix anyway. So, you know, I once you add in sound effects and you add in dialogue and you add in all this stuff, a lot of these things disappear. Like the like, once again, the engine's revving and everything. I don't know if it's going to be loud enough to really.
Can we stop it?
Get down.
You can't hear it. But I think I'm trying to make my point is that I'd rather it sound real and maybe slightly sloppy than sound like metronome precise. I'd rather it sound like, oh, you may not have had another take to do this, but it sounds real, than it being overly quantized. And people get on me about that. I have friends that are like, oh my gosh, it's, you know, whatever it is. But at the same time, there's like a certain amount of real energy that gives that you don't get otherwise. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So the next thing is this last little hero theme. So in this orchestration, this is especially like the lead is violins, horns, and trumpets. And so if you look at this, and I guess also also high woodwinds, and I mean the high woodwinds are pretty minimal. You know, here's the, I mean, it doesn't sound like anything on that, you know. But let's see, then horns. Let's see, I think I'm doubling them. Yeah, so like, and there's different things, like there's certain things I like about each of these libraries, and I'm trying to incorporate. So it's Spitfire. Is that my dog? Making weird noises. Spitfire phalanx horns, which honestly, this is actually the first time I've actually used it and been happy with it, which is, you know, sacrilege. But this is, you know, 6-horn Cinna brass. This is like all 3 horn libraries going on right now in this mock-up. So, and the ending's kind of weird because there's some other parts going on. And this is the brass. And this is, once again, this is like all shorts, and then I'm in Cinemabrass, and in Cinematic Studio Brass, you mod wheel between the lengths. So you can see here's where it changes over to like a different articulation. This is the F. So that's the let's see, where is, oh, here it is. So here's like, and then I'm doubling it with the phalanx. So, and then the last element of that is there are just certain libraries that do certain things really well, and it's just, I don't know, I get these things that are very frustrating. Like, it's hard for me to not use them. So, Adagio, like the old Adagio series from 8Dio, has these like nice marcatos, and yeah, that library had issues. Like, it just had certain things that that drove me a little nuts, but like, it just has these really nice. So this is between like this is between a staccato and a marcato, right? And then, but whenever you go full on, right, like it has that front end punch that you get with like violins playing full bore with like a little bit of vibrato, that like it has this energy that some other libraries don't have, and it just kind of does it. So a lot of times, like if I'm like in this library, I think in this queue I'm using mostly Cinna strings, afflatus strings, and a little bit of adventure strings for like some of the shorts. But like, I don't know, I don't really worry. I mix and match string sounds all the time. Like and I'm using some Albion strings, but like that's how I just really love their like front end their front end attack. They're like. And that's just like sustained notes. Like it's not of that's what one is this? I don't remember what library this is. It's the same people who make soaring strings. That's who it is. They have a nice like calming. That's two different notes. It's just a nice, if I want to do like a pad or a low chord or something, it sounds nice. Their quiet one sounds great. And then there is a hit. Oh, I must have hidden it. There's a sub boom hit, like an old school Drums of War sub boom hit. And then yeah, I think generally the other thing, and I'm not going to go through and like do the whole spotting process. I think like that's going to make this video so long. Obviously, it has a lot of twists and turns. There's also why this was so time consuming. But I think that something to take away from this is that how something I'm always struck by. Let me just rephrase. Something I'm always struck by in films, especially like big features, and is like how relatively little you have to do whenever the work is being done for you on screen. So if an actor's really giving a good performance, or I mean, even if you watch Star Wars The Force Awakens, there's this scene where Rey is climbing up the mountain at the end of the movie in the island, and like it's just basically chords. Like it's chords with a little bit extra. And I catch myself doing this where I'm just like, oh, put the theme in, do everything, do counter melody, do all this stuff. That sounds great. But you're really not necessarily servicing picture. So something I was also trying to exercise on this is like, how much do you really need? Like, yes, this style is very over the top and it's very intense, but like, how much do you actually need when doing this? So, just something to think about. Like I said in the earlier part of this, I'll put a link down in the description to my walkthrough of my template if you want to know more specifically about my template. I haven't remade it. I need to remake it, but or make a new version of it. And I'm not using a ton of EQs. I'm not like people are asking how I mix it. I kind of have my pre-mix and then I just do things each time I'm working. Like, oh, it doesn't sound right. Let me try to make it sound right. And I'm mostly doing that in like CC controls and how I play something and what the MIDI data is. So I don't know how long this has run. So I hope that it's useful. I hope that people like it. And good luck to everyone in the competition. It was a lot of fun to just get to write whatever I wanted. I'm sure that's what a lot of people thought as well. I just got to write without anybody else giving me any feedback or producers or directors giving you notes. It was just fun to do whatever you wanted. So cool. So thanks for watching.